Look, I take responsibility for every decision I made, but that's not why I lost. But I was on the way to winning until the combination of Jim Comey's letter on October 28th and Russian WikiLeaks raised doubts in the minds of people. You know, if the election had been on October 27th, I'd be your president. At some point, it sort of bleeds over into misogyny. I got paid for the speeches I made, and it was used, and I thought it was unfairly used. I inherit nothing from the Democratic Party.
What do you mean, nothing?
I mean, it was bankrupt.
To assign blame to Bernie Sanders, to the media for focusing on emails.
How much time do we have? The use of my email account was turned into, the biggest scandal since Lord knows when. I also think I was the victim of a very broad assumption I was going to win. The Russians could not have known how best to weaponize that information unless they had been guided. And here's
guided by Americans.
Guided by Americans. If you look at Facebook, the vast majority of the news items posted were fake. You had Citizens United, unaccountable money flowing in against me.
Hillary Rodham Clinton has spent the last 10 months trying to figure out why she isn't president of the United States.
I'm not going to step back from telling my truth. The idea of a woman president, white, authoritarian. There was something that was personal toward me. The Russians weaponizing information, negative stories about me, this whole WikiLeaks of John Podesta's emails, they were taken out of context. We now know Facebook, voter suppression, feeds in, I think, to the whole sexism and misogyny. And the attacks were so sexist. A lot of the sexism and the misogyny, and then let's not forget sexism and misogyny. We really don't want a woman commander-in-chief. Nostalgia. Yeah, millions of white people. The forces that were at work, it was a perfect storm, using personal email. Presented in such a negative way, I don't know quite what audience he was playing to. Right-wing commentators, right-wing members of Congress, but for that Comey letter, she would have won. So badly damaged because of that. 11 days before the election, it just stopped my momentum. Help me make sense of that. There was anger and there was resentment. A lot of people didn't want to hear my plans. Trump was behaving in a deplorable manner. A large number of people who didn't care. Oh, but they were already energized. I don't buy that. Having him scowling and leering, it was so discombobulating. Back up, you creep. Maybe I missed a few chances. My share of Chardonnay. I wanted to tell what happened, and the primary was part of what happened. Won a landslide victory in the primary. I didn't get the same respect from my primary opponent. A lot of his supporters continue to harass. Well, you're supporting a woman because you're a woman. Yes, and they're still out there. And Bernie's not a Democrat. It's very hurtful. Enough. At some point, it sort of bleeds over into misogyny. And let's just be honest, people who have Putin wants to bring us down, and he is an old KGB agent. If you look at Facebook, the vast majority of the news items posted were fake. They were connected to, as we now know, the 1,000 Russian agents who were involved in delivering those messages. They were connected to the bots that are just out of control. We see now this new information about Trump's Twitter account being populated by millions of bots. Bannon, who'd been running the Breitbart operation, supplying a lot of the untrue, false stories. What we saw was, in this election particularly, and I appreciate what Walt said, the first time that you had the tech revolution really weaponized politically. I inherit nothing from the Democratic Party.
What do you mean nothing?
I mean, it was bankrupt. It was on the verge of insolvency. Its data was mediocre to poor, non-existent, wrong. The group running this was the GRU, which is the military intelligence arm of the Russian military, and they have a very sophisticated cyber operation. In bed with WikiLeaks, in bed with Guccifer, in bed with DC Leaks. They were conveying this weaponized information and the content of it. And they were running, there's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites. And I also think I was the victim of a very broad assumption I was going to win. The biggest Google searches were not for Comey, because that information was just lying out there. It was for WikiLeaks. We know that the Google searches for this stuff were particularly high in places in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. They began to have some of their allies within the internet world, like InfoWars, take out pieces and began to say the most outrageous, outlandish, absurd lies you can imagine. Your Twitter account is saying, oh my gosh, Hillary Clinton is running a child trafficking operation in Washington with John Podesta. You had Citizens United come to its full fruition. So unaccountable money flowing in against me, against other Democrats. You had effective suppression of votes. Wisconsin, under the current governor, Scott Walker, has been one of the leaders in voter suppression. I'd taken a tremendous hit after the Comey letter. He dumps that on me on October 28th, and I immediately start falling. The mainstream media covered that, as I say, like Pearl Harbor, front pages everywhere, huge type, etc. My momentum, particularly among women in the suburbs, stopped and dropped. Some people stayed home. We're getting more information about all of the contacts between Trump campaign officials and Trump associates with Russians before, during, and after the election. He does have a visceral grasp of America's political underbelly. He really understands how to inflame people, how to motivate them, how to bond with them over whatever their grievance is. Whatever resentment or point of anger that you may have, if he can get into it, whether it's race or xenophobia or Islamophobia, whatever it is. Look, I take responsibility for every decision I made, but that's not why I lost.
I got 99 problems, but a bitch ain't one.
Comey, WikiLeaks, voter suppression, fake news, all of that. And that's kind of what happened. So,
in her 512-page memoir, Hillary Clinton is candid about losing the presidency to Donald Trump.
I felt like I had let everybody down.
Clinton blames herself for using a private email account when she was Secretary of State that led to a government investigation. But she also questions former FBI Director James Comey's motivations for reopening the investigation less than 2 weeks before the election.
It just stopped my momentum. Now remember this too, Jane. At the same time he does that about a closed investigation, there's an open investigation into the Trump campaign and their connections with Russia.
Clinton's loss to Donald Trump was one of the most stunning in U.S. political history. The veteran Washington insider versus the brash outsider. Although she won the popular vote, she lost the electoral vote primarily because 4 large swing states and 3 traditional Democratic states voted for Trump. Clinton's critics say her failure to connect with working-class voters is a lesson for the Democratic Party.
One of the main questions that Democrats are asking themselves is, how do we actually connect with a huge part of the country that used to vote Democratic and doesn't reliably do so anymore?
Still, some political scientists say Clinton was a victim of bad timing.
So there is a reality that out of the 6 individuals who have run for a 3rd term of their party, only one of them has won. So if she had really thought about the odds are more like that she had about a 17% chance of actually succeeding President Obama.
Clinton's return to the spotlight is making some in her own party uneasy. They fear her book could further alienate progressive Democrats who favored Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders for the party's nomination last year. Sanders seemed to agree in a recent talk show.
We need her help to go forward. Let's not keep arguing about 2016.
Clinton says she's closing the book on being a candidate, but isn't necessarily closing the book on politics. Still, she won't say how she'll write her next chapter. Diane Estabrook, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Nice to meet you finally. Thank you. Thank you. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. Hi.
Hi, it's so great to see you.
Well, it's great for you to be here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Oh.
So the American people would really like to know what happened to your 33,000 emails? What happened in Benghazi?
Go read the book.
What happened to the millions of dollars that was supposed to go to the people in Haiti?
You know what? I'm so sorry you believe things that are untrue.
What happened to Seth Rich?
Hi, nice
What happened to your health, Hillary?
We're just going to move to the end of the line with your
Thanks.
Keep your receipts out.
Tula.
30 seconds. Keep moving to the end of the line.
Oh.
I just my email.
Huma, it's so great to see you. I have a question for you. When are you going to divorce your husband for texting underage
We're
girls?
going to step out of here. Get out. Yep, we're going to step out of here. Thank you.
I need my book. I paid for a book.
Step out of here. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Step out.
Can I have my book? Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll just go get my book downstairs.
What? Let me
Oh,
look at this man.
thanks.
Hold on.
I'm going right now.